Emily Carter never imagined that the moment she stepped into the labor and delivery wing of New York Presbyterian Hospital, her workplace, her second home, the place where she had guided countless mothers through fear and pain, would become the moment her own life shattered. She had felt the early contractions for hours, trying to hide the tightness in her chest, the trembling in her hands, the dread curling inside her stomach. Jason, her husband, had arrived late, smelling faintly of expensive cologne she didn't recognize. He held his iPhone in one hand, texting nonstop, barely looking at her as she leaned on the wall for support. But the real shock came when another pair of heels clicked sharply behind him. Sabrina Hayes. A woman Emily had only met once, in a brief and awkward encounter outside Jason's office on Park Avenue. Sabrina was young, polished, and far too comfortable standing close to Jason. Emily had sensed something wrong that day, but she pushed the thought aside. Pregnancy exhausted her. Maybe her instincts were off. Maybe she was paranoid. But now, in the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor, with her contractions growing closer and her breath shortening, the truth stood right in front of her. Sabrina smiled softly, as if greeting an old friend. "Jason told me you'd be here today," she said, brushing a strand of perfectly curled blonde hair behind her ear. "I just wanted to make sure he's taken care of." Emily tried to speak, but another contraction hit, folding her body with a sharp jolt of pain. She grabbed Jason's sleeve for balance. Instead of helping her, he jerked his arm away. "For God's sake, Emily, stop being dramatic," he muttered. A nearby nurse, Lily, rushed over with a wheelchair. "Emily, sweetie, sit. You're dilating early. Let's get you inside." But Sabrina tilted her head and lowered her voice just enough for only the three of them to hear. "Jason, are you certain the baby is really yours?" Emily froze. Jason's jaw tensed. His nostrils flared, and before Emily could even blink, his hand swung across her face with a crack that echoed down the hallway. The world tilted. The floor rushed up. Lily screamed for security. A tray of instruments clattered. Emily hit the ground on her side, pain shooting through her abdomen like lightning. Her ears rang. Her vision blurred. She tasted blood. She heard Sabrina gasp fake, rehearsed, almost amused. She heard Jason breathe heavily, as if the slap had released something inside him. And worst of all, she heard Lily's trembling whisper near her ear. "Emily, your baby's heartbeat is spiking. You need to breathe. Stay with me. Stay with your baby." Emily tried. She truly tried. But fear swallowed every breath. She had delivered dozens of babies in this very hall. She had calmed frightened mothers, held trembling hands, wiped tears. She knew what panic did to a body in labor. She knew the danger her baby was suddenly in. Faintly, through the ringing in her ears, she heard security being called. She heard nurses shouting for an emergency room. She heard someone mention that the camera above them had captured everything. She heard Sabrina's heels stepping back cold, calculated, victorious. Then she heard Lily whisper urgently to another nurse. "Someone important just pulled up outside. They said he's asking for Emily Carter." Before Emily slipped into a fog, she caught one final sentence. He said, "He's her father." And the hall went silent. And 5 minutes later, the hospital doors swung open. Long before Emily Carter ever set foot in the delivery room as a patient, she was just a quiet girl from Queens who learned too early how to live without things other people took for granted. Her mother, Leanne, worked double shifts at a neighborhood grocery store, always coming home with tired eyes and a gentle smile. Emily remembered those nights vividly, her mother heating canned soup, braiding her hair, whispering small lessons about kindness and dignity. Those memories became the foundation of Emily's life. But when Emily turned 17, her mother collapsed at work from an undiagnosed heart condition. By the time Emily reached the hospital, it was too late. Her father, William Stone, a high-ranking military officer, had been deployed overseas at the time. He returned home to bury his wife and face a daughter who barely spoke for months. The grief built a quiet wall between them, one neither knew how to cross. William tried, he really did. But he was a man shaped by discipline, not soft words. And Emily, gentle to the core, didn't know how to express the ache inside her. Eventually, William sent her to live with her aunt in Queens, believing she needed a more stable emotional environment while he continued serving. Emily understood, or tried to, but the distance remained. When she turned 19, she enrolled in nursing school. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right, caring for others the way no one had been able to care for her mother. She juggled part-time jobs, late-night classes, and her own loneliness. And then one rainy evening, everything changed. She met Jason Miller. He walked into the Starbucks where she worked the night shift, drenched from the storm, holding a ruined MacBook under his jacket. Emily offered him free hot chocolate, even though she could get written up for it. Jason laughed, teased her gently, said she had the kindest eyes he'd ever seen. Emily's heart opened in a way she didn't expect. Jason began visiting every night. He remembered her favorite cream cheese bagel, asked about her classes, waited for her shift to end so he could walk her to the subway. For the first time in years, Emily felt seen. She never told Jason about her father being a decorated military general. She feared he would treat her differently or think she had money. Emily wanted love that was simple, honest, built from shared moments, not someone using her father's rank as a stepping stone. But slowly, little cracks began to appear. Jason always needed help. Help with rent, help paying off a temporary credit card issue, help covering late fees. Emily worked harder, stretching herself thinner. When she finally graduated and became a nurse, Jason insisted they move to Manhattan so he could build his career. She agreed, though the rent was suffocating. She supported most of the bills while he worked on himself, then later took a job on Park Avenue. When Emily got pregnant, she hoped the news would bind them closer. Instead, Jason grew distant, cold, distracted. He worked late almost every night. His phone was always upside down on the table. He took sudden weekend trips for training. Emily tried to believe him. She tried to hold their fragile life together the way she'd once tried to hold her world together after her mother died. But a few months into the pregnancy, Emily smelled perfume on Jason's shirt, a scent she didn't recognize. She mentioned it gently, and Jason snapped at her, accusing her of paranoia. That night, he didn't come home. Emily cried quietly, alone in their dim apartment, one hand on her belly, promising her unborn child she would keep going. She just didn't know that the lies around her were already tightening, preparing to collapse. And the first person to see the collapse wasn't Jason. Manhattan had a way of revealing distance between people, and for Emily, that distance grew clearer after leaving her modest Queens life for Jason's ambitious world. Every morning, she rode the crowded subway to New York Presbyterian, while Jason headed to Park Avenue, dressed sharper, speaking faster, carrying new confidence she barely recognized. Emily packed homemade lunches. Jason carried polished folders Sabrina had given him. At first, the differences felt small, but as months passed, they widened like a quiet fault line running through their marriage, leaving Emily wondering when she had become the only one trying to hold them together. Jason's new job placed him inside a sleek glass tower overlooking the East River, a world built on status and quiet competition. Sabrina fit there effortlessly. Her bracelets, her perfect hair, her confident smile, everything about her signaled belonging. Emily noticed the shift in Jason through small things he brought home. A Mont Blanc pen she hadn't bought, a scent that didn't come from her, a confidence bordering on arrogance. She told herself not to worry, but every object whispered that Jason was drifting toward a life where she no longer fit, a life shaped more by image than by love. At the hospital, Emily felt grounded. Mothers trusted her gentle hands, and colleagues relied on her calm nature during difficult cases. But even there, she saw how different her world was from Jason's. Some patients arrived with private drivers, wearing luxury coats Emily would never afford. Others complained about hotel suites they felt were too small. Emily didn't envy them. She simply wondered when Jason began wanting that life more than the one they had built together. He suggested she dress more polished, buy better bags, change how she spoke. Each request felt like losing a piece of herself. Sabrina appeared in Emily's life like a shadow that refused to fade. She showed up in Jason's stories, his messages, his excuses. Emily tried to ignore the tension but couldn't deny the growing closeness between them. Sabrina sent Jason motivational articles, invited him to evening events, and praised him publicly online as if she were shaping his future. Emily overheard Jason telling a coworker that Sabrina understood him, words that struck harder than she expected. She wondered when she had become someone he tolerated rather than cherished, someone fading behind the brightness Sabrina brought into his world. As Emily's pregnancy advanced, the distance between her and Jason became unmistakable. He missed appointments, ignored her cravings, and scrolled through his phone while she described the baby's movements. She tried to stay hopeful, but loneliness clung to her like a heavy coat. One night, she found a Starbucks cup in their kitchen with Sabrina's handwriting on it. Jason claimed it was nothing, yet Emily felt something inside her break. She realized she was carrying not just a child but the weight of a marriage slipping through her fingers, a burden too heavy for her tired heart to hold. But the moment that sealed everything came at Jason's office holiday party. Emily attended, hoping to reconnect, hoping to understand the world he wanted so desperately. Instead, she wandered unnoticed through glittering halls filled with people who measured worth in power and presentation. When Sabrina wrapped her arm around Jason and introduced him as the future of our floor, Emily felt her breath falter. Jason didn't correct her. He didn't step away. Standing beneath chandeliers she didn't belong under, Emily understood she had already lost him long before the slap inside the hospital that cold December night forever. She just didn't know someone else was already watching. Jason Miller had never been the kind of man who handled power well. The moment he stepped into the fast, competitive world of Park Avenue, he began to believe he deserved more than he had. Sabrina Hayes fed that belief with every calculated compliment she offered, slowly sharpening his ambition into a weapon he didn't realize was being aimed at his own marriage. She was subtle at first, helping him edit emails, praising his ideas, inviting him to coffee meetings where she talked about success as if it were a gift she could personally grant. Jason, hungry for validation, absorbed every word. Soon, Sabrina began to reshape Jason's thoughts about Emily. She spoke softly, as if concerned. "Your wife doesn't understand this world," she whispered. "She's holding you back." Jason didn't argue. Part of him knew it was cruel, but another part, one Sabrina had carefully inflated, believed he was destined for something greater than the quiet life Emily offered. He started coming home later, claiming work was piling up. But Emily noticed the lies lurking between his sentences. Then came the night Sabrina showed up outside their apartment under the pretense of delivering important documents. Emily opened the door to see the other woman standing there, holding a folder and an expression that made Emily's stomach twist. Sabrina apologized for interrupting, but her eyes darted around the small living room with thinly veiled judgment. Jason, instead of sending her away, invited her inside. Emily pretended not to mind, but the moment haunted her. Weeks later, Sabrina pressured Jason to sign papers she claimed would help him secure a future position. He signed without reading, trusting her far more than he should have. Emily sensed something was wrong, but Jason snapped whenever she asked. Meanwhile, Sabrina quietly isolated him, making sure he saw Emily as an obstacle, not a partner. The final push came during a tense conversation in Jason's office. Sabrina told him that Emily's pregnancy was a career burden. She leaned in, voice low, saying, "If you want the life you deserve, you need to let her go." Jason stood there, conflicted, but Sabrina slipped her hand into his, tilting his future toward her and away from Emily. He didn't pull back. From that moment, Sabrina tightened her hold. She sent Emily a deliberate text, a photo of Jason's desk with her coffee cup sitting next to his. Emily stared at the image for a long time, feeling her heart drop. She realized Jason had opened a door Sabrina wanted to walk through completely. What Emily didn't know was that Sabrina had one more move planned, a move designed to push Jason past the point of return. And that move was set to unfold on the day Emily went into labor. It was a plan so cold, so calculating, that it would change everything forever. Jason received a message from Sabrina early that morning, urging him to meet her before heading to the hospital. She claimed it was urgent. In truth, she wanted to ensure he arrived late, frazzled, and emotionally caught between them. Jason, already under her influence, obeyed without thinking. While Emily struggled through sharp contractions alone, Jason sat with Sabrina in a quiet cafe, letting her feed him fears about fatherhood and responsibility. She told him he was not ready, that Emily would trap him with the baby, that he deserved a life with someone ambitious. Jason left that cafe, convinced his future depended on listening to Sabrina, not his wife. He walked into the hospital with a heart already poisoned soon. The chaos began the moment Emily was rushed through the double doors of the maternity wing. Her contractions were coming faster, sharper, threatening to pull her under. Nurses guided her toward a room, urging her to breathe, but the hallway felt colder than usual, as if something terrible had already settled in the air. Jason followed a few steps behind, irritated rather than worried, glancing repeatedly at his phone as if texting Sabrina mattered more than the life Emily was fighting to bring into the world. He walked like a man inconvenienced, not a husband witnessing his wife in pain. Inside the room, Emily clung to the rail of the bed, trying to steady herself. Sweat gathered on her forehead. She tried to catch Jason's eye, hoping for even a sliver of compassion, but he refused to look at her. Instead, he muttered, "You always make a big deal out of everything, as if labor were nothing more than a dramatic performance." His tone pierced deeper than any contraction. Emily tried not to cry. Crying would only make him colder. A nurse named Valerie approached, checking Emily's vitals and speaking gently. "You're progressing quickly, sweetheart. We need you calm. Focus on your breathing." Emily nodded, grateful for Valerie's softness. But then the door opened again, and Sabrina stepped inside as if she had every right to be there. She stood with perfect posture, smiling politely at the nurses, then shifting her gaze toward Jason. Her presence was an insult wrapped in expensive perfume. "Jason, you left your folder in the car," she said lightly, holding it toward him. "I thought you might need it." Emily blinked in disbelief. The gall of this woman, the shamelessness, the cruelty. Every nurse turned to stare, confused and offended. Jason took the folder without hesitation, his face warming with embarrassment, but not for Emily. For Sabrina? For being seen with her? Valerie frowned. "Sir, only immediate family is allowed in right now." Sabrina raised her eyebrows, pretending innocence. "I'm just here to support Jason. He's under a lot of pressure." Then she added, with deliberate softness, "And we're not even sure the baby is." Emily didn't hear the rest. Something inside her broke. The humiliation hit harder than the physical pain. She was trapped in a hospital gown, vulnerable, breathless, and these two stood over her as if her suffering were an inconvenience. Jason snapped. "Stop crying, Emily. You're embarrassing yourself." And then, without warning, he slapped her again, his hand striking her cheek in full view of the entire room. The sound sliced the air. Everything froze. Valerie gasped. Another nurse shouted for security. A medical cart rattled as Emily stumbled sideways, nearly collapsing. Her heart raced so fast she felt dizzy. She curled around her stomach instinctively, terrified for her baby. She tasted fear. She felt shame tightening her throat. She saw nurses rushing, voices blending into panic. But Sabrina didn't flinch. If anything, she almost looked satisfied. "Jason," she whispered. "She's manipulating you." Valerie stepped between them. "Sir, get out now, or I will have you removed." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but before he could, a code alert sounded overhead. The charge nurse ordered immediate monitoring. Emily's vitals were unstable. Her breathing was shallow. The baby's heart rate spiked dangerously. The room filled with technicians and nurses as they prepared for complications. Outside the room, orderlies whispered. Someone replayed the hallway camera footage. Someone else made a phone call. And word spread quickly through the floor. Emily Carter had been assaulted by her husband during labor. Then Valerie leaned close to Emily and whispered, "Sweetheart, someone's coming. Someone who knows exactly what happened. And he's already on his way." The walls of the delivery room seemed to close in as Emily struggled to breathe, each contraction stealing a little more of her strength, each sob tightening around her chest like a fist. The sting from Jason's slap still burned on her cheek, but the deeper pain, the betrayal, the humiliation, the fear sat inside her like a weight she couldn't lift. Monitors beeped urgently. Valerie and two other nurses moved quickly, adjusting straps, checking vitals, whispering calming words, trying to keep her and the baby stable. But Emily felt herself drowning under everything she'd tried so hard to hold together. She grabbed at the sheets, voice trembling. "My baby, please, is he okay?" Valerie squeezed her hand gently. "We're doing everything we can. You need to breathe for him, Emily. Deep breaths. You're stronger than you think." But Emily wasn't sure she believed that anymore. She could barely feel her legs, and her hands shook uncontrollably. Tears blurred her vision. She felt guilty for letting Jason treat her this way. Guilty for not leaving sooner. Guilty for letting this poisonous stress reach her unborn child. Every thought shattered against her racing heartbeat. Outside the room, she could hear fragments of chaos. Security being called, staff arguing with Jason, Sabrina's shrill voice trying to defend him. The sound made Emily curl inward, her body instinctively protecting her belly. She remembered the promises Jason once made, how he used to hold her softly after long shifts, how he talked about building a family. But now, the man yelling just beyond the door didn't even resemble the one she married. Valerie leaned over her again. "Emily, look at me, right here. You're safe. He can't hurt you right now." But the truth was, Jason already had. He'd broken something in her that she wasn't sure could be rebuilt. Another contraction hit sharp, ripping through her spine. Emily gasped, gripping the rails of the bed. A nurse turned to the monitor and frowned. "Her pressure's dropping. Fetal heart rate is erratic. We need to stabilize her now." Emily squeezed her eyes shut. A wave of dizziness washed over her, pulling her dangerously close to losing consciousness. She tried to focus on her baby, on the tiny heartbeat she had listened to for months, the one thing that made her hopeful. But fear swallowed her thoughts. "Should we call the attending?" a nurse asked. Valerie hesitated. "Yes, and notify security to keep the father away. This is escalating." The door burst open slightly as someone pushed against it. Jason's voice shot through the room like a dagger. "Emily, stop pretending. You're fine. Tell them you're fine." Valerie snapped, "Sir, step back or you will be removed." But Jason kept shouting, calling Emily dramatic, calling the nurses biased, calling himself the victim. His anger seeped under the door like smoke, suffocating the air inside. Emily covered her ears, tears streaming, trying to block out the voice of the man who should have stood beside her. Suddenly, the door slammed shut again. Security must have intervened. The hallway quieted. Emily heard Sabrina protesting, her voice rising in indignant disbelief. The nurses exchanged glances. "I swear," one muttered, "these two have no idea what they've done." Emily felt another contraction twist through her. She cried out, clutching Valerie's arm. "Please, someone help us, please." Valerie brushed back her hair. "You're not alone, Emily." And someone else heard what happened. Someone who cares. Emily blinked through tears. "Who?" Valerie hesitated, then whispered, "A man arrived downstairs. He asked for you by name." Emily's breath hitched. Her father? After all these years? After all that silence? But Valerie wasn't finished. And when security told him what happened, he didn't say a word. He just walked toward the elevators. Emily stared at the door, chest rising and falling unevenly. And the entire floor felt the tension shift because the elevator had just reached their level. The elevator doors slid open with a chime that seemed too soft for the man who stepped out. General William Stone didn't need to raise his voice or puff his chest to command a hallway. Authority lived in the way he walked, steady, controlled, carved from years of discipline. His uniform coat wasn't military anymore, but his posture still carried the echo of battlefields and responsibility. Nurses paused mid-stride. Security straightened instinctively. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed to sharpen as he approached. He held a folder in one hand and his phone in the other. On the screen, replaying on loop, was the hallway footage. Jason raising his hand, striking Emily, watching her fall. Every time the slap sounded through the small speakers, his jaw set tighter. He had seen soldiers break, seen families lose everything, but nothing had prepared him for the image of his daughter, his quiet, gentle, forgiving daughter being hit while carrying his grandchild. A security guard stepped forward. "General Stone, this way, sir. The patient is stable for the moment." William didn't answer. He simply nodded and continued walking. Down the hall, Sabrina froze the moment she saw him. She still wore her sleek coat and perfect makeup, but her confidence faltered. She whispered to Jason, "Who is that?" Jason shrugged, annoyed. "Probably some old guy causing problems." The guard cleared his throat. "That old guy is General William Stone." Jason's face drained of color. Sabrina blinked. "Wait, Emily's father? I thought her family was ordinary." Jason whispered sharply, "She never told me." William reached them before either could step away. His eyes didn't look angry. Anger would have been easier to face. Instead, he looked controlled, calculating like a man assessing threats. "Jason Miller," he said, his voice cool as steel, "you hit my daughter." Jason opened his mouth, panic rising. "Sir, it was a misunderstanding. She fell. She lost her balance." William held up a hand. Jason fell silent immediately. "Your explanation," the general said, "is irrelevant. The camera does not lie." Sabrina tried to intervene. General Stone, with respect, Emily has been very emotional. Jason has been under a lot of stress. Labor situations can be. William turned his gaze to her, and she stopped talking instantly. You must be the one who encouraged this behavior. His tone didn't rise, but it carried weight. I saw the video. You smiled when she fell. Sabrina swallowed hard. William stepped closer. If either of you attempts to enter her room again, you will be removed, charged if necessary, and publicly exposed. Do you understand me? Jason nodded rapidly. Sabrina tried to maintain composure but shifted uncomfortably under his stare. A nurse approached quietly. General Stone, she's asking for you. Something softened in his eyes for the first time. He followed the nurse toward Emily's room, pausing only once to glance back at Jason. You had one job, he said quietly, to protect her. And instead, you endangered 2 lives. Jason's breath caught as if the words themselves cut him. When William entered the room, Emily lay pale against the pillows, tears drying on her cheeks. Her eyes fluttered open, confused, exhausted. When she finally recognized him, her breath broke on a single word. Dad? He moved to her side, taking her hand gently as if afraid she might shatter. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here now. Emily tried to speak, but dissolved into sobs, her whole body trembling. William held her as carefully as if holding a wounded soldier, murmuring, You're safe. I've got you. The machines beeped steadily, but emotions swelled too fast to contain. Emily clung to him, every fear finally collapsing into the one person who had never meant to leave her. For a moment, the room felt still. Then Valerie hurried back in, face tense. General, we have a problem. Something was happening to the baby. General William Stone straightened immediately, his hand tightening around Emily's as Valerie moved closer. The tension in the room rose like a storm about to break. Emily's heartbeat was still erratic, and the baby's monitor showed troubling fluctuations. Though William had stood in war zones, nothing compared to watching his daughter fight for breath while carrying a child who hadn't even taken his first. Valerie spoke carefully. General, the baby responded to the stress earlier. His heart rate is unstable. We need calm in here. No shouting, no agitation, and absolutely no contact with the father. Emily's grip tightened. Dad, don't let him near us, please. William brushed her hair gently, his voice steady. He won't come near you. Not again. You focus on breathing. I'll handle the rest. Another nurse entered with an update. Security has Jason and the woman waiting outside. They're demanding information and refusing to leave the hallway. Emily trembled visibly. The thought of Jason outside the door sent her heart racing all over again. William saw the fear in her eyes and made a decision with military precision. I'll be right back, he murmured, squeezing her hand once more before stepping into the hall. The moment William stepped outside, eyes turned toward him. Nurses pretended not to stare, but they did. Security kept their distance, yet stayed alert. And at the end of the corridor, Jason and Sabrina stood pressed against each other, like children caught doing something wrong, except their wrong had consequences far beyond what they understood. Jason's voice rose first. Why can't I be in the room? She's my wife. William walked toward him with the slow, controlled stride of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to dominate a battlefield. His presence alone forced Jason to take a step back. You forfeited that right, William said softly, the moment you laid a hand on her. Jason's face twisted. She provoked me, she always. William's hand shot up in the air, not to hit, but to silence, and Jason froze as if someone had cut the sound from his chest. You will not blame her, William said, voice dropping an octave. You will not rewrite what happened. You will not pretend. I saw the footage. I saw you strike my pregnant daughter, and I saw this woman. He turned to Sabrina. Smile while she fell. Sabrina lifted her chin. General Stone, with respect, you don't know the full story. Oh, I know enough, he replied. Enough to know that both of you are dangerous to a woman who only ever wanted peace. Jason sputtered. You can't keep me out. I'm the father. William stepped closer, so close Jason had no choice but to look at him. If you take one step toward that room, I will personally request charges against you. And the hospital has eyewitnesses and a recording to support them. Jason paled. Sabrina stepped sideways, her confidence thinning under William's gaze. This is ridiculous, she muttered. You can't scare us just because you're a man who knows the law? William finished. A man who knows exactly how to ensure justice is done. A man who will burn down every wall you try to hide behind if it means protecting his daughter? He leaned in. Yes, I can. Silence swallowed the hallway. A nurse peeked out from Emily's room. General, she needs you. The baby's responding better when she hears your voice. William nodded once, then turned his back on Jason and Sabrina, the ultimate dismissal. But Jason wasn't done. You think you can keep her from me forever? He shouted. William paused without turning. I don't think, he said. I know. He stepped back into the room, leaving Jason shaking with rage and Sabrina gripping his arm hard enough to leave marks. Inside, Emily's eyes opened weakly. Dad, are they gone? William sat beside her, voice softening like warm air after a storm. They won't touch you again. Not today. Not ever. Emily exhaled, a breath full of exhaustion and fragile relief. Valerie checked the monitor and smiled slightly. Good. His heartbeat is settling. But before anyone could relax completely, a new alarm beeped sharply. Something else had just shifted and the danger wasn't over yet. The sudden alarm cut through the room like a blade. Emily jolted, her breath catching as the monitor beside her flashed a warning. Valerie rushed forward, adjusting straps, smoothing sensors, murmuring, reassuring words that didn't quite hide the worry etched across her face. General William Stone stood rigid, every instinct inside him sharpening. He had seen crises unravel within seconds on foreign soil, but this watching his own daughter fight to stay calm felt far more dangerous than any battlefield. After a tense moment, the alarm softened, settling back into a steady rhythm. Valerie exhaled with relief. He's stabilizing again, but we're not out of the woods. Emily nodded weakly, tears shimmering at the corners of her eyes. I'm trying. I'm really trying. William touched her shoulder gently. You're stronger than you know. His voice softened. Stronger than I ever realized. But even as Emily closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the pain, William's mind was already racing. In war, threats didn't end. When the shooting stopped, they hid, regrouped, and struck again. And he sensed, with a clarity sharpened by decades of experience, that Jason and Sabrina were far from finished. A knock sounded on the doorframe. A hospital administrator stepped inside, holding a tablet and looking troubled. General Stone. I was told you requested access to Mr. Miller's background files. She glanced between him and Emily. Are you sure you want this information now? Emily's eyes opened slowly. Files? What files? William hesitated. He hadn't intended to burden her yet, not while she was still fighting through labor, but the moment had arrived whether he wanted it or not. Bring it here, he said quietly. The administrator handed over the tablet. Jason's name flashed across the screen, followed by a series of documents, disciplinary reports, financial disputes, flagged incidents from his previous job, and something else William hadn't anticipated. An internal inquiry from Jason's current company, filed 2 weeks earlier. Emily swallowed hard. Dad, what is all that? William pulled a chair beside her bed and sat down. Sweetheart, Jason lied to you. Not just about Sabrina, not just about work. There are deeper issues, things he's been hiding for years. He scrolled to the first document. He was written up for manipulating financial data at his last company. Emily blinked in disbelief. He told me they laid him off because they were downsizing. They didn't downsize, William said. They fired him, and he nearly faced charges. Another swipe, a new file surfaced, one with Sabrina's name connected. She was involved back then too, William said. This isn't a new affair. It didn't start at Park Avenue. It started long before. Emily's breath hitched. The monitors responded instantly. Stay calm, Valerie whispered. Breathe with me. William waited until Emily's breathing steadied, then continued. There's more, he said. Sabrina used Jason's name to sign paperwork at their company. Documents involving money transfers that could lead to federal investigation. Emily stared at him, stunned. What does that mean? It means, William said slowly, that Jason was a fool, and Sabrina was using him as a shield. If anything went wrong, he would take the fall. Emily felt her heart sink. He never told me. He couldn't, William replied, because he knew you'd see the truth. There was another knock. A security officer stepped inside. General, you should see this. William followed him into the hallway. Sabrina stood near the nurse's station, arguing, her voice sharp with anger. Jason hovered behind her, pale, sweating, eyes darting anxiously. "What now?" William asked. The officer handed him a printed page. "This was found in Sabrina's bag. She tried to destroy it." William unfolded the paper. It was a copy of the documents she'd tricked Jason into signing power of attorney forms, ones that transferred all of Jason's assets into Sabrina's control. Jason leaned forward, confused. "What? What is that?" William turned the page toward him. "Your future," he said coldly. "Or rather, what's left of it." Jason's mouth fell open as he read, realization crashing over him like a wave. Sabrina stiffened, her composure finally fracturing. "Jason," William said, stepping closer, "you weren't her partner, you were her sacrifice." Emily, hearing the commotion from inside her room, gripped the sheets tightly. And at that moment, she realized Jason's betrayal had roots far deeper and far darker than she ever knew. For a long moment, after hearing the chaos in the hallway, Emily lay motionless, staring up at the ceiling tiles, as if they held answers to questions she had buried for years. Her breath trembled. Her heartbeat thudded unevenly beneath her ribs. She wasn't just fighting through contractions anymore. She was fighting through years of silence, compromise, fear, and the heavy weight of betrayal she had never wanted to acknowledge. Pain came in waves, both physical and emotional, each one hitting harder than the last. Valerie watched her closely. "You need to stay with me, Emily. You're doing everything right. Just keep breathing." Emily nodded, but tears slid down her temples. "Everything. Everything I thought I knew. It's just gone." Valerie dabbed her forehead gently. "Sometimes the truth hurts harder than the labor, but you're not alone anymore." Emily closed her eyes. The truth. It rolled around inside her mind, sharp and unforgiving. Jason's cruelty, Sabrina's manipulation, the lies that had slowly suffocated her life. The way she had bent herself into smaller shapes just to keep the peace. All those nights she sat at the kitchen table, rubbing her belly, telling her baby that the world was full of love even when she felt none of it herself. Another contraction seized her body. She gasped, her fingers clutching the bed rails until her knuckles turned white. The monitor beeped rapidly, the baby responding to her distress with frantic pulses. Valerie leaned close. "He feels everything you feel, sweetheart. You have to fight for him right now. Don't let their mistakes break you." Emily tried. God, she tried. But her mind kept replaying Jason's face twisted in anger, the moment his hand struck her, the moment Sabrina smirked as she fell. She remembered the early days, Jason's soft voice, his warm hands, the gentle promises whispered under cheap Queens streetlights. And she remembered how those promises slowly turned into excuses, then criticisms, then attacks so casual they felt rehearsed. "I thought he loved me," Emily whispered, voice cracking. Valerie didn't sugarcoat it. "Some men love the idea of a woman, not the woman herself." Emily's breath shivered. Then the door opened quietly, and General William Stone stepped back into the room with a calmness that seemed almost unnatural given what he had just witnessed. But Emily recognized that look. It was the expression he wore at her mother's funeral, the expression of a man holding back an ocean just to keep one person afloat. He moved to her bedside. "Emily, look at me." Her eyes fluttered open. "You are not responsible for his actions," he said firmly. "You didn't make him lie. You didn't make him cheat. You didn't make him raise his hand. That darkness belonged to him long before you ever walked into his life." Emily sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "Dad, I tried so hard. I thought if I loved him enough." "Love," William said, his voice low and steady, "does not cure a man who refuses to confront himself." Emily's breathing steadied, not because the pain faded, but because the truth finally made sense. She wasn't weak. She wasn't foolish. She wasn't to blame. She had simply loved the wrong man with the right heart. Another contraction surged, but this time Emily grabbed William's hand instead of the rails. He held her tightly, grounding her. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. "Not ever again." Valerie checked the monitor again. "General, keep talking to her. When she hears your voice, the baby responds better." William nodded and continued, his tone softening. "Your mother would be proud of you, of your strength, of the way you fought for your child even when no one fought for you." Emily cried openly, but something inside her began to shift, something small but powerful. A spark, a decision, a quiet reclaiming of herself. She inhaled slowly, deeply, as another contraction came, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel like she was breaking. She felt like she was rising. The nurses exchanged relieved glances. But then the room lights flickered. A hurried knock sounded. A doctor rushed in, breathless. "We need to prepare for possible early intervention. Things are changing fast." And Emily realized the fight for her baby had only just begun. The doctor's words hung in the room like a cold draft. Emily felt her pulse quicken, not from fear this time, but from a sudden, sharp clarity cutting through the pain. Valerie began preparing equipment, moving with the calm urgency of someone who had faced the worst and knew how to steer through it. General Stone stayed at Emily's side, steady as a pillar, refusing to let his expression show anything but strength. Yet even he could sense something shifting inside her, something resolute, something awakening. Emily inhaled unevenly. "Doctor, just tell me the truth. How dangerous is this?" The doctor adjusted his glasses. "Your stress levels are affecting the baby. His heart rate is unpredictable. If things escalate, we may have to intervene early. You need stability physically and emotionally." Emily nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Then I need one thing first. One thing only." William leaned in. "What is it?" Emily swallowed, courage building in her chest. "I don't want Jason to have any rights to this baby until after I'm safe. I want him legally kept away. No more chances, no more explanations, no more pretending." Her voice cracked, but it didn't break. "If I don't draw a line now, I never will." William's jaw tightened, pride flickering beneath the grief in his eyes. "I can make that happen." Valerie squeezed Emily's hand. "This is the strongest I've seen you today. Hold on to that." Another contraction struck, sharp and heavy, but Emily gritted her teeth and rode through it with a new kind of focus. Pain no longer made her feel powerless, it fueled her resolve. A security officer knocked lightly and stepped in. "General, legal wants to know if you want to file an emergency protective order. The footage is already in the system." Emily didn't hesitate. "Yes, I want it on record." William nodded at the officer. "Do it, immediately." The officer hurried out, but the moment he left, shouting echoed from the hallway. "You can't do that." Jason's voice cracked with panic. "She is my wife. That is my child." Emily shivered but kept her eyes closed. Valerie glared at the door. Unbelievable. Then Sabrina's voice followed, dripping venom. "He doesn't belong to her anymore. She's just—" William rose from his seat so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice deadly calm. Emily reached for his sleeve. "Dad, don't fight him. Just stop him." William softened instantly. "Sweetheart, stopping him is the one thing I can do perfectly." He stepped out of the room. The hallway erupted the moment the door shut behind him. Jason lunged forward, shouting, "You can't keep me out. You don't get to decide." William raised a single hand. The hallway went silent. "Jason," he said, voice low, "you lost the right to be near my daughter the moment you raised your hand, and now the law will reflect that." Jason's face twisted, desperate. "She needs me." "No," William said sharply. "She needed a husband months ago. She needed kindness, protection, respect. You gave her none of that." Sabrina scoffed. "We're calling a lawyer." William's eyes narrowed. "Do that. And while you're dialing, ask your lawyer to explain the consequences of financial fraud. Because those documents you tricked Jason into signing, yes, I've already forwarded them." Sabrina froze. Jason turned ghost pale. What documents?" William leaned in. "The ones that hand every resource you own to her. The ones she planned to disappear with while leaving you to take the fall." Jason's shock turned into rage. "Is that true, Sabrina?" Sabrina stumbled. "Jason, listen." But he never heard the rest. His legs gave out, and he collapsed back against the wall, breathing erratically. Inside the room, Emily listened to the muffled argument, her heart surprisingly calm. The truth was painful, yes, but it was also freeing. For the first time, she could see the beginning of a life not shadowed by Jason's anger or Sabrina's cruelty. The doctor returned to her side. "Emily, we need to make decisions soon. Are you ready?" Emily wiped her cheeks, inhaled deeply, and straightened her back despite the pain. "Yes," she whispered, "because this time I choose what happens next." But before the doctor could respond, a nurse burst into the room. "General Stone, something's happening with Jason." and the hallway had suddenly gone quiet. Too quiet. The hallway fell so silent that even the beeping monitors inside Emily's room seemed to echo. General Stone turned sharply as two security officers held Jason upright. His face was drained of color, his breath rapid and shallow. Sabrina stood several feet away from him, arms crossed tightly, her mask of confidence finally cracking. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jason looked up at William with a mixture of fury and terror. "What did you do to me?" he gasped. William stared at him coolly. "Nothing. You did this to yourself." Jason tried to lunge forward, but his knees buckled. Security tightened their hold. Sabrina took a step back, as though distancing herself from a sinking ship. A nurse approached quietly. "General, his vitals are spiking. Should we call for medical help?" William didn't look away from Jason. "If he needs treatment, give it, but he does not leave this floor until law enforcement arrives." Jason shook his head violently. No law enforcement. You can't do that. She's my wife. This is a private matter." William lowered his voice until it cut sharper than any shout. "Striking a pregnant woman is a criminal matter. Using her stress to push her into early labor is a criminal matter. And involving fraud, well, Jason, that's a federal matter." Jason stared, bewildered. "Fraud?" William held up the document the security guard had found, Sabrina's copy of the forged power of attorney form. "This is your signature." Jason blinked rapidly. "I didn't," she said. "It was a promotion form, she told me." "For a man who claims he's smart," William interrupted coldly, "you sign whatever she puts in front of you." The humiliation on Jason's face was unmistakable. Sabrina looked away, jaw tight, refusing to take responsibility. She tried to walk off, but a security officer blocked her path. "You can't keep me here," she snapped. "I'm not the one in labor." "No," William replied, "but you are the one whose name appears in an active financial investigation." Sabrina stiffened. "That's not proven." "It will be," William said. "Your company has already been contacted. They forwarded us everything." Jason whipped his head toward her. "Everything? Sabrina, what did you do?" Her voice sharpened. "Don't put this on me, Jason. You followed me because you wanted success, because you wanted out of your pathetic little life with her." Jason's eyes narrowed. "You used me. And you let me," she spat. The two glared at each other, each realizing the other had never loved them at all. It was a hollow partnership built on ambition, lies, and the illusion of power. A doctor stepped into the hall. "General Stone, Emily's vitals are stable for now, but she needs calm. Please keep any confrontation away from her door." William softened instantly. "Thank you, doctor." Jason forced himself upright. "I need to see her. She has to hear me out." William stepped squarely between him and the door. "You will not go near her. She's my wife." "Not anymore," William said. "The emergency protective order is being filed as we speak." Jason's mouth opened slowly, disbelief crashing over him. "You can't take my family," he whispered hoarsely. "You threw your family away," William corrected. "And now the law is catching up." Jason shook his head, desperate. "I can fix it. Let me talk to her. Just let me talk to her." "You should have talked to her before you raised your hand," William said. A collective hush fell over the hallway. Jason slumped back into the chair, security placed behind him. His hands shook. His eyes darted back and forth, searching for a way out, a plan, an excuse, anything to undo what he'd done. Sabrina stood stiffly as two officers approached her. "Miss Hayes, we have questions about the accounting discrepancies you were involved in." She scoffed, tossing her hair. "I want my lawyer." "You'll need more than a lawyer," the officer replied. Inside the room, Emily could hear muffled voices. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she felt the shift, the unraveling of everything that had once held her captive. Valerie approached her bedside. "You're doing so well. Just stay focused on your baby." Emily nodded, emotions swirling. She wasn't safe yet, but she was no longer powerless. Then the door burst open. A nurse, breathless, stepped inside. "General Stone, we have another development. Someone just arrived downstairs asking for Emily and the baby." William's expression hardened. And this time, it wasn't Jason. The nurse's announcement sent a ripple through the room. But before General Stone could ask who had arrived, another contraction gripped Emily so violently she cried out. Valerie rushed to her side, adjusting the monitor and calling for additional staff. The door closed gently behind the nurse, leaving only the urgent beeping and Emily's trembling breaths. William stayed beside her, anchoring her with his steady hand. But outside, the storm he had been holding back was already building. Down the hall, Sabrina Hayes stood rigid as two hospital security officers questioned her. Jason remained slumped in the chair, staring at the floor like a man realizing his own life had burned down while he was still standing inside it. The officers lifted a folder, copies of forged signatures, suspicious banking transfers, and a timeline of late-night activity logged from Sabrina's office computer. Every page was another nail in the coffin of their so-called partnership. "You can't seriously think this is my fault," Sabrina snapped, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Jason agreed to everything. "He's the one who mismanaged the funds." One officer raised an eyebrow. "Except his signature here is traced, and your access card was used to authorize the transfer." "That proves nothing," Sabrina said sharply. But her voice cracked. Jason lifted his head slowly. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now brimmed with betrayal. "You told me those papers were for a promotion package. You said the company needed them to approve my transfer." Sabrina scoffed. "And you didn't think to read them?" "Jason, that's not my fault. You're the one who was desperate." She crossed her arms tightly. "People like Emily never would have gotten you where you wanted to go. I was helping you." Jason swallowed hard. "Helping me? You were setting me up?" Sabrina rolled her eyes. "Oh please, I didn't force you to fall in love with the idea of power. You followed me because you wanted to. Don't pretend otherwise." The officers exchanged looks. Then one of them spoke. "Miss Hayes, we have your company's compliance department on standby. They said they'd be sending their internal investigator and are willing to cooperate fully with federal authorities. They forwarded an email, one you sent at 2:14 a.m., stating you had secured a disposable signature." Sabrina froze. "That email was meant for someone else," she said quietly. Jason's voice rose, edged with disbelief. "Disposable? You called me disposable?" Sabrina didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was enough. Jason surged to his feet, rage shaking through him. "You ruined my life." The officers stepped between them immediately. General Stone emerged from Emily's room just in time to hear Jason's outburst. He approached calmly, though the steel in his eyes never softened. "You did that yourself," William said. Jason turned to him desperately. "She used me." "She didn't force you to lie," William replied. "Didn't force you to cheat. Didn't force you to hit a woman carrying your child." Jason flinched. "And now," William continued, "you're facing consequences you can't charm your way out of." Sabrina tried to step back again, but another officer approached her. "Miss Hayes, we need you to come with us. You're being detained for questioning." "For what?" she whispered. "For fraud," he said, "and conspiracy." Sabrina's mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, the mask slipped completely, revealing pure panic beneath the polished exterior. Jason sank back into the chair, burying his face in his hands. But before anyone could move further, the elevator doors opened. A man stepped out dressed in a white coat, holding a medical folder. He wasn't frantic, he wasn't confused, he walked with purpose. Valerie peeked from Emily's door and whispered to William, "General, that's Dr. David Collins, the neonatal specialist. He insisted on coming personally. He said he knows your daughter." William frowned. "Knows her?" Valerie nodded. "He said he's been concerned for her for months." Emily, hearing voices outside her door, looked up weakly. "Who's here?" she whispered. Valerie hesitated, then smiled softly. "Someone who cares about you more than you realize." And the look in Dr. Collins's eyes when he walked toward Emily's room made it clear this wasn't the first time he'd come to save her. Dr. David Collins approached the delivery room with a calmness that didn't match the chaos happening on the floor. Tall, composed, with a steady gaze that carried years of neonatal experience, he moved like a man who knew exactly when to step in and when to stay quiet. Nurses who were usually unfazed by emergencies straightened when he passed. General Stone recognized authority when he saw it, and David carried it effortlessly. But what struck William most was the way David's eyes softened the moment he saw Emily through the glass window. Fragile, trembling, yet fighting with everything she had. Valerie met him at the doorway. "She's in active distress labor. Baby's heart rate is unstable. We've been trying to keep her calm." David nodded, already pulling on gloves. "How long has she been like this?" "Since the incident," Valerie replied. His jaw tightened. "I heard." William stepped closer. You know my daughter? David hesitated for only a breath. I've been running prenatal consults at this hospital. Emily, she always stayed late after her shifts, asked more questions than most. I noticed she was under a lot of stress these last few months. He paused. I didn't know why. Now I do. William studied him for a long second, then gave a small, approving nod. Help her. David pushed into the room. Emily turned her head weakly at the sound. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Dr. Collins? He offered her a gentle smile. Hey, Emily. I'm here now. Let's get you and your baby through this safely, all right? A tear slipped down her cheek, not from pain this time, but from relief. David checked the monitor, assessed her contractions, and listened to the baby's heartbeat. His voice was calm, soothing, and impossibly steady. He's fighting, just like his mother, but we need to help him along. Emily tried to speak, but her breath caught. I'm scared. I know, David said, but you're not alone. As he prepared an emergency setup in case things worsened, William moved to Emily's other side. She gripped both of their hands, one strong and familiar, the other gentle and unexpected. Another contraction hit like a crashing wave. Emily arched forward, crying out. The baby's heartbeat spiked again. Deep breaths, David coached. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Good. Again. Emily followed, tears pooling, but her breathing steadied. The room shifted from panic to controlled urgency. Nurses moved with precision. William whispered, encouragements soft ones he had rarely spoken when she was a child. You're doing it, sweetheart. Just a little more. Emily tightened her jaw, pushing through another contraction. Sweat trickled down her temple. She felt her strength draining, but David's voice brought it back each time she faltered. Then, suddenly, the monitors changed tone. David's head snapped up. He's ready. The staff sprang into motion. Emily screamed raw, primal, desperate. Pain radiated through her entire body. She gripped William's hand so hard he winced, but he didn't pull away. One more, Emily, David urged. Give me one more. He's right there. She inhaled shakily and pushed with everything she had left inside her heart. A beat later, a sharp, piercing newborn cry filled the room. Emily collapsed back on the bed, sobbing. Relief washed over her in waves as David lifted the tiny infant, careful and steady, and handed him to the waiting nurse who cleaned and wrapped him. David walked back to Emily with a tender smile. He's perfect, strong, and loud. Valerie placed the baby into Emily's shaking arms. She stared at him, tiny fingers, tiny breaths, tiny life, and broke into quiet, trembling sobs. William wiped his eyes discreetly. David watched them, warmth softening every line of his face. But then the door burst open and a nurse breathlessly announced, General Jason is demanding to see the baby. Valerie's expression darkened. David stepped slightly in front of Emily instinctively. William turned toward the door, eyes cold. Because whoever thought they could barge into that room now was about to face a different kind of war. The moment the nurse announced Jason's demand, the air in the room tightened. Emily instinctively pulled her newborn closer, her arms trembling as she shielded him with her body. The tiny baby let out a small whimper, sensing her panic. William stepped forward immediately, his presence forming a protective barrier. David stood beside him, calm but alert, every muscle in his posture quietly prepared to intervene if necessary. Valerie touched Emily's shoulder reassuringly. No one is getting in here, not unless you want them to. Emily shook her head quickly. No, please don't let him near my baby. You have my word, William said, his voice low and unwavering. Outside, muffled shouting grew louder. Jason's voice, broken, angry, desperate, echoed down the hallway. She can't keep my son from me. I demand to see him. Sabrina's voice followed, sharp and furious. Jason, stop yelling. You're making this worse. Emily closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She had imagined this moment, holding her child for the first time, would be filled with joy, soft, light, relief. She never imagined fear would creep into the edges of that joy. But then she looked down at her baby's peaceful face, and something inside her shifted. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the hospital hours earlier. She wasn't weak anymore. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't alone. She was a mother, and a mother does not bow. Emily inhaled deeply. Dad, I want him removed, legally, permanently. I don't want him in my life or my son's life. William nodded firmly. That's already in motion. Before he could elaborate, the door opened a crack only for a security officer to enter, closing it behind him. "General, we've contained the situation for now, but Mr. Miller is becoming increasingly unstable. We may need to escort him off the premises." "Do it," William said immediately. But the officer hesitated. "There's one more issue. He's claiming Emily assaulted him during their argument before she went into labor." Emily's head snapped up. "What? I didn't even touch him." David stepped forward sharply, anger flashing in his normally calm eyes. "She has medical staff as witnesses from the moment she arrived. He won't get away with twisting this." Valerie crossed her arms. "We saw her walk in alone, shaking, crying. That man is lying through his teeth." William turned to the security officer. "Document everything, and notify hospital administration there will be no false reports filed today." His tone hardened. "My daughter will not be dragged through further humiliation." The officer nodded and slipped back out. Emily held her baby closer. His tiny chest rose and fell gently, his warmth seeping through her skin like a quiet promise. She looked to David, who stepped beside her, his expression softening as he watched her cradle her child. "You did beautifully," he said, voice gentle. "He's strong, he's healthy, and he's lucky to have you." Emily's throat tightened. "Thank you for everything. If you hadn't come—" "I came because you needed help," David interrupted softly. "And because I care." Emily blinked, startled. No one had said those words to her in months. Her heart fluttered not in confusion, but in recognition of something familiar, yet long forgotten. Kindness. Before she could respond, William returned to her bedside. "Sweetheart, there's something else." He placed a laptop on the rolling tray. "I emailed the Dean of Columbia's nursing program. The scholarship you earned years ago, it's still honored. They held your file." Emily stared at him in shock. "What, Dad? Why? Why now?" William's voice cracked, just barely. "Because I should have fought for you sooner. I'm fighting now." Tears filled her eyes. "Dad?" David smiled quietly, stepping back to give them space. For the first time, Emily felt a sense of future forming, one where she wasn't merely surviving but rebuilding, rising, reclaiming everything she had lost. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the hallway. Valerie's head jerked up. What was that? A nurse ran in, breathless. General Jason broke away from security. He's demanding access again. William stood instantly. David followed. Emily clutched her baby to her chest. And this time, she wasn't afraid, she was ready. The crash outside the room sent a shockwave through the hallway. Nurses gasped. A tray clattered to the floor. Security scrambled after Jason, who shoved past them with a wild, unhinged look in his eyes. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his whole body trembling with the kind of rage born not from love but from losing control. Sabrina followed several steps behind, shouting for him to stop, though her panic was far from loyalty. She was afraid of what his meltdown would drag her into. Inside the room, Emily heard the chaos and instinctively curled around her newborn, shielding him with her arms. Her heart hammered, but this time the fear did not swallow her. Instead, a strange calm settled over her. She had survived the slap. She had survived the betrayal. She had survived labor. She could survive this too. William moved to the door immediately. "Stay with her," he told David. David nodded firmly, positioning himself beside Emily's bed not as a doctor now, but as a protector. The moment William stepped outside, Jason lunged toward him. "Where is she?" "I want to see my son." Security officers blocked Jason, but he shoved one aside. "You can't keep him from me. He's mine." William didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You have no rights here anymore, Jason. A protective order has already been signed." Jason's eyes bulged with panic. "That's impossible. She wouldn't do that to me." "She did," William said, "and you earned every consequence." Jason snarled, spit flying. "You turned her against me." William stepped forward, inches from Jason's face. "You did that yourself when you hit her, when you humiliated her, when you brought that woman into her delivery room." Sabrina stiffened at the reference. "I didn't do anything wrong." William turned his cold gaze on her. "You forged documents. You manipulated him. And now federal investigators are on their way." Sabrina's breath caught. "Jason, tell him the truth. Tell him." But Jason snapped. "You ruined everything," he shouted at her. The officers tightened their grip, trying to restrain him. From inside the room, Emily's voice, fragile but firm, cut through the chaos. "Let him speak." Everyone froze. Emily stood in the doorway, her newborn nestled securely in her arms, David hovering behind her in case she faltered. Her legs were trembling. She was barely hours out of delivery, but her spine was straight, her shoulders squared. Jason stared at her as if seeing a ghost. "Emily," he whispered, "please, please don't do this. I messed up, but we can fix it. I love you. I just got confused." Emily's eyes filled, but not with softness. "You don't get to love me when it's convenient," she said quietly. "You don't get to hurt me and then hide behind excuses." Jason shook his head violently. No, Emily. Listen, she pressured me. Sabrina made me do things. Sabrina let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Don't blame me, Jason. You followed willingly. I didn't force you to cheat. I didn't force you to lie. And I definitely didn't force you to hit your pregnant wife." Jason gaped at her. You said you loved me?" Sabrina rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you were a placeholder, a convenient tool." Jason sagged, crushed. Emily took a breath, clutching her baby a little tighter. "Jason, I don't hate you. I don't even wish you harm. But I will not let you near my child. You are dangerous, and we deserve peace." Jason's expression twisted. "He's my son." "No," Emily corrected softly. "He is a child, not a possession." The officers moved to take Jason away, but he lurched forward one last time, reaching out not for Emily, but for the baby. He never made it. William stepped between them with a force that stopped Jason cold. David grabbed Emily by the shoulders, pulling her back to safety. Jason screamed as officers dragged him away, his voice cracking, echoing down the hallway like a broken siren. "You can't do this. You can't take my life from me." Emily exhaled shakily, clutching her baby close as the hallway finally fell silent. David whispered, "You did it. You really did it." Emily looked up, eyes shining. "No," she said. "I survived him. Now I choose the rest of my life." But fate wasn't finished yet, because someone unexpected was waiting downstairs to see her. Security dragged Jason down the hall as he kicked, thrashed, and shouted every excuse he could reach for. His voice cracked, desperate and hollow, echoing off the sterile hospital walls. Emily watched him disappear around the corner, her baby resting against her chest, his tiny breaths steady and warm. She didn't feel triumphant, yet only exhausted. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet sense of justice began to settle, not revenge. Just truth finally rising to the surface. William closed the door gently, returning to her side. David hovered nearby, ready to help her sit, walk, or simply stand if she needed support. Emily leaned into the bed, knees trembling. "Is it finally over?" she whispered. William shook his head. "One part is over, but the consequences for him and Sabrina, those are just beginning." Emily held her son tighter. "Good." Downstairs, chaos had already started unraveling around Sabrina. As she tried to storm toward the elevator, 2 officers intercepted her. Her voice raised in a frantic pitch. "You can't treat me like a criminal. I work for a major corporation. You have no idea who you're dealing with." A 3rd officer approached, holding an envelope. "Miss Hayes, your company's compliance department sent over urgent files. They confirmed irregular transactions tied to your account and your signatures." Sabrina laughed bitterly. "Those aren't my signatures. Jason forged them." Jason, from the hallway, yelled, "No, I did not. She told me to sign everything." Sabrina whipped around, face flushed. "You idiot. You're not supposed to say that out loud." Jason shouted again, "You used me." A 4th officer arrived. "We've contacted federal investigators. Miss Hayes, you'll need to come with us for questioning." Sabrina's eyes widened. "Federal? For what? This is outrageous." "For initiating fraudulent transfers totaling over $200,000, the officer said calmly, "and for coercing another party into signing illegal documents." Sabrina's mouth dropped open as she realized how deep her trouble ran. "Jason," she hissed, "tell them you pressured me." Jason slumped in the chair, defeated. "I'm done lying for you." Sabrina's expression shifted from anger to pure panic. Jason, don't do this." But it was too late. Officers guided her toward the exit while she shouted half-formed protests, her polished world crumbling faster than she could talk her way out of it. Back upstairs, William returned to Emily's room. "Both of them are being taken into custody. It's out of our hands now." Emily nodded slowly. I don't want them near us ever again. You won't see them again, he assured. A nurse stepped inside. Emily, we've prepared a private recovery suite for you. It's quiet, secure, and away from everything. Emily exhaled. Thank you. David moved closer. I'll help transfer you and the baby. As they wheeled her down the hall, staff members gave her soft smiles and nods of encouragement. Emily had been known as the gentle, hard-working nurse who rarely spoke up for herself. Today, she was something entirely different, stronger, braver, unbroken. Inside the private suite, sunlight poured in through wide windows overlooking the Hudson River. Emily settled onto the soft bed, the baby tucked in her arms like the world's smallest miracle. David adjusted the blankets around her, his touch warm and steady. You did something incredibly hard today, he said softly. Emily managed a tired smile. It doesn't feel real yet. It will, he replied, and when it does, you'll see you didn't just survive, you protected your son. That's strength. William stood nearby, clearing his throat as if trying to hide emotion. Your mother would have been proud, he said. Emily looked up, eyes shimmering. I hope so. As the room grew quiet, a gentle knock sounded at the door. A nurse peeked in. Emily, there's someone downstairs asking for you. He says he's family. Emily frowned. Family? The nurse nodded. He said, he's your uncle. And he brought something important. Emily exchanged a confused glance with her father. And just when she thought the past had fully caught up with her, another piece of her future was waiting outside. Emily sat upright in the private suite, her newborn nestled safely against her chest, while the nurse's words echoed in the quiet room. Someone downstairs claiming to be family? She blinked, feeling a flutter of confusion. Her family had always been small, just her father, her late mother, and a quiet life in Queens. No uncles ever visited, no reunions, no unexpected appearances. William exchanged a glance with her, his brow tightening. Your uncle? I don't have any brothers. Emily swallowed. Mom didn't either, that I know of. David stepped forward gently. Do you want me to check before he comes up? Emily considered it. Her heart was still fragile, her body exhausted, and she was fiercely protective of the tiny life pressed against her heartbeat. Yes, she whispered. Please. David nodded and left the room swiftly, his presence briefly warming the air before disappearing into the hall. Emily leaned back, her head sinking into the pillows. The baby stirred softly, making a small sound, half sigh, half dream. She kissed the top of his head, breathing in that delicate newborn warmth that filled her chest with something she hadn't felt in months. Hope? William moved closer, pulling up a chair beside her. How are you holding up? His voice was gentler now, stripped of the steel he used in battle and confrontation. Emily exhaled slowly. Better than I expected, worse than I hoped. He chuckled softly, though his eyes remained glassy. That's motherhood, sweetheart. For a moment, they sat in a quiet that wasn't heavy anymore, just full. Emily touched her father's hand. Thank you. For coming. For fighting for me. I didn't realize how much I still needed you. William's gaze softened. I never stopped being your father. I was just waiting for you to come back. Emily swallowed, moved beyond words. Everything she thought was broken, her strength, her self-worth, her trust, slowly began knitting itself back together. The door opened. David re-entered, his expression warm but serious. He's genuine, he said. His name is Thomas Whitaker. He claims to be your mother's cousin. He said he lost contact with your family years ago when he moved states. He came because he heard everything. Emily tensed. Everything? How? David hesitated. It's been spreading. Staff talk. A high-ranking general showing up. Security incidents. Fraud. It didn't stay quiet. Emily closed her eyes. The hospital rumor mill. She should have expected it. William sighed. Do you want to see him? It's your choice. Emily took a breath. Yes, but... Give me a moment. David nodded and slipped outside again. Emily looked around the room, the view of the Hudson River, the warm sunlight, the quiet hum of the machines. It was peaceful. It felt like a beginning. She brushed her baby's cheek with one finger. This is our new life, she whispered to him. No more pain, no more fear. A tear slid down her cheek, but this one wasn't from heartbreak, it was from release. The door opened again. An older man with kind eyes, soft features, and weathered hands stepped inside. His expression wavered between relief and sadness. "Emily? You look so much like your mother." Emily's breath caught. "You knew her?" He nodded slowly. "I loved her like my own sister. We lost touch after she moved here. I didn't know she passed." Emotion twisted inside her chest. "Why did you come?" Thomas stepped closer, opening the worn leather folder he carried. "Because she left something for you. Years ago, she asked me to hold on to it in case life ever hurt you badly enough that you needed to remember who you are." Emily stared at him, stunned. He held out the folder. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were letters, photographs, and a deed to a small lakeside cottage her mother had kept secret, a quiet place meant to protect Emily someday. Emily gasped, her heart swelling with emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed her. David stepped back into the room, watching the scene unfold with quiet awe. Thomas smiled gently. "Your mother wanted you to have a safe home, a place to start over." Emily clutched her baby, tears falling freely now. She had come here broken, but she would leave with her son, her father, a new future, and a home built from her mother's love. And outside the room, David realized he wasn't ready to let Emily start that future without him. The sun had begun dipping behind the skyline, casting warm gold across Emily's private recovery suite. The room felt quieter, now safer, softer, like the universe itself was finally giving her permission to breathe again. Her newborn slept peacefully against her chest, tiny fingers curled around the fabric of her gown. William stood by the window, speaking quietly with Thomas, the long-lost cousin who brought pieces of her mother back into the room. And David lingered near the foot of the bed, pretending to check a chart he had already reviewed 3 times. Emily noticed. He wasn't good at hiding genuine emotion, not with her. When Thomas and William stepped out to give them space, David finally looked up. Their eyes met, and the warmth in his expression softened something inside her that had been stiff with fear for months. "You're doing incredibly well," he said quietly. "Stronger every hour." Emily brushed a finger along her baby's cheek. "I don't feel strong." "You are," David replied. "Anyone else would have fallen apart, but you fought for your son in the middle of everything." Emily gave a shaky smile. "I think I survived because I wasn't alone." David's voice lowered. "You deserved someone in your corner a long time ago." She met his gaze. "I never thanked you properly. For coming. For helping. For caring." David stepped closer, his voice calm but trembling at the edges. "Emily, I didn't just show up today because it was my job. I showed up because I've been worried about you for months." Her breath caught. "Months?" He nodded. "Every time I saw you in the halls, you looked like someone trying to carry the world on her back. You'd smile, but it never reached your eyes. I wanted to ask if you were okay, but I didn't want to overstep." Emily swallowed, heart fluttering. "Why?" David hesitated, then answered honestly. "Because I was afraid of caring too much." Silence washed over them, soft and electric. Emily looked down at her baby, then back at David. "I didn't think anyone noticed me." "Not really." "I noticed," he said, "more than I should have." Another pause, gentle, expectant. Emily felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not the shaky, uncertain dependence she once had with Jason. Something steadier, something that didn't demand or consume, something that simply existed. Quiet and real. David cleared his throat softly. "I didn't come here to make things complicated. You've been through enough. I just want you to know that whatever future you're walking into, you don't have to walk alone." Emily's eyes filled slowly, but the tears were different now, lighter, clearer. "David, I'm not ready for anything yet. I need to heal. I need to rebuild my life." "I know," he said gently, "and I'm not asking for anything today. I just want to be someone you can lean on if you choose to." Her heart ached at the sincerity in his voice. She nodded. "I want that too. A friend, someone steady." David's expression didn't falter. In fact, it softened further. "Then that's where we'll start." Before she could respond, her baby stirred, stretching tiny fingers toward David as if reaching for him. David smiled, placing one finger gently in the baby's palm. The infant grasped it instantly, holding tight. David froze, then laughed quietly. "I guess he approves." Emily's breath trembled, filled with unexpected warmth. He doesn't usually do that with strangers. Good, David murmured, because I'm hoping not to stay one. The door opened gently. William peeked in, observing the moment with an expression Emily had never seen on her father, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something that looked dangerously close to approval. He stepped inside. Emily, whenever you're ready, we can talk about next steps. A new home? A new start? Emily nodded slowly. She looked at her baby, then at David, then at her father. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel frightening. It felt possible. But tomorrow held one final moment, one she never imagined she would face with a steady heart instead of a breaking one. Morning sunlight poured into Emily's recovery suite like a gentle blessing, softening every shadow that had once lived in her life. Her newborn slept peacefully in a small bassinet beside her bed, wrapped in a warm blanket the nurses had gifted. Emily sat up slowly, her body sore but her spirit clearer than it had been in years. The storm was over. Truly over. William entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Emily. She smiled gratefully. Dad, thank you. For everything. He sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You fought your own battle. I only showed up to reinforce the line. Emily laughed softly, the sound light and free. A very good reinforcement. A gentle knock came at the door. David stepped in, his presence warm but respectful, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. I didn't know if flowers were appropriate, he said, but they felt peaceful. Emily accepted them with a soft smile. They're perfect. William watched the exchange with a subtle nod, then rose. I'll check on Thomas downstairs. He's preparing the paperwork for the cottage transfer. When her father stepped out, David moved closer, hesitant but hopeful. How are you feeling this morning? Tired, she admitted, but also lighter. Like I finally put down a weight I carried for too long. David smiled. You look lighter. Emily hesitated, then spoke gently. Thank you for yesterday, for staying, for standing between us when I couldn't stand alone. David's voice softened. You were never alone, Emily. Not really. Before she could reply, the door swung open and a hospital administrator entered with a quiet urgency. Miss Carter, I just wanted to inform you that Mr. Miller has officially been taken into custody. Charges have been filed: domestic assault, attempted parental interference, and obstruction. Emily's chest tightened, but not from pain. From closure. Will I have to see him again? She asked. Not unless you choose to. The protective order stands. Permanently. Emily nodded, relief washing over her. The administrator continued. As for Miss Hayes, she's facing multiple federal charges. Their company is fully cooperating. She won't be leaving custody anytime soon. Emily closed her eyes. Justice wasn't revenge. It was simply truth restored. Thank you, she whispered. After the administrator left, David pulled a chair close. You didn't deserve any of that, but you deserve everything that comes next. Emily looked at her sleeping baby. Her voice trembled with emotion. I want a life he can grow up proud of. With peace. With safety. With people who love him. You will have that, David said. And I'd like to be part of it, if that's something you'd ever want. Emily met his gaze slowly, her heart warming. Not now, she whispered. But someday? Yes. I can see that. David smiled, a relieved, honest smile that made her chest feel full. A nurse entered quietly. Emily, someone's waiting in the family lounge. He says he's your lawyer. He brought documents for your new home. Emily felt her breath catch. The lakeside cottage, her mother's last gift, a place untouched by pain or lies. William reappeared at the doorway. Ready to see it, sweetheart? Emily nodded, her heart steady. She carefully lifted her baby from the bassinet, holding him close. David offered an arm for support. Emily accepted, standing with slow, proud determination. Together, they walked down the hallway, the same hallway where she had once been slapped, humiliated, broken. But now, nurses smiled warmly, staff whispered with admiration. And Emily, she walked with her head high. At the exit, the sunlight felt different. Brighter, warmer. Her father stood beside her. David stood slightly behind, ready if she needed him. And in her arms, her son slept softly, a symbol of new beginnings. Emily stepped into the light and whispered to herself. I choose peace, I choose freedom, I choose life. And as the door closed behind her, the past stayed where it belonged, while the future opened wide. This was the ending she deserved, and the beginning of everything she had yet to receive. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But if you're still here with me, listening until this very moment, then something in Emily's journey has touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of someone you love, or maybe it reminded you of yourself. Life can be brutal, unfair, and unpredictable, but as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Emily's pain didn't end her, it shaped her. It pushed her into becoming the woman she was always meant to be. Her story reminds us that walking away from what breaks you is not weakness, it is courage. That choosing peace over chaos is a form of self-respect. And that healing is a slow rebuilding, day by day, with small choices that lead us back to ourselves. If this journey made you feel something strength, hope, clarity, then let's keep walking together. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue telling stories that heal, inspire, and remind you that you're never alone in what you feel. Thank you for being here. Truly.